And we are back right here on Digital World, Freedom 106.5, every single Friday from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. with myself, Keron Rose, and Miss Ricolia Phillip. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this man literally needs no introduction. And because he needs no introduction, I have to give him one prestigious introduction because listen, the work that this man is doing is inspiring to, I think, everybody from the young to the old. Today, we're going to be exploring the intersection of creativity, technology, and business. And we are honored to have one of Trinidad and Tobago's most celebrated contemporary artists and designers, Mr. Nicholas Huggins, here. He is known for his ability to blend the essence of Caribbean culture with unique, modern aesthetic. Nicholas has not only captivated audiences at home, but has brought his authentically Trini style to the global stage. Over the years, Nicholas has evolved from a promising designer to an influential creative entrepreneur. From designing the Google Doodle, celebrating the steel pan, to collaborating with major brands like Angostura and Kets the Band, Nicholas has shown that art can transcend boundaries and speak to audiences worldwide. As the founder of Backyard Design Company, he has also built a thriving design agency that merges his artistic vision with brand storytelling. But today, we're going to be taking a special journey into Nicholas' mind and imagination as we discuss his latest exhibition, Field Trip. This collection of works captures the extraordinary beauty in the everyday moments of Trinidad and Tobago, from quiet beaches to roadside fruit stands. Through Field Trip, Nicholas invites us to slow down, look closer, and rediscover the magic that exists in the ordinary. In this conversation, we're going to be uncovering the evolution of Nick as an artist, the story behind Field Trip, and how he has turned his passion for art into a successful business. We'll also dive into some of the business of art, how he has been able to market his work globally, build a distinctive style, and inspire others to embrace the creative economy. So whether you are an artist, an entrepreneur, or just someone who loves hearing about the power of creativity, this is the conversation you do not want to miss out on. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the digital world, Mr. Nicholas Huggins.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for that. Thanks for that incredible introduction.
For an incredible person, man. How you doing,
Thank you,
boss?
thank you. I'm good. Sitting here with some blushing, So thank you for that.
No, man. Listen, it's been really. I think our last conversation was 2022.
Yeah.
That was when the Google Doodle had dropped, right? 2022.
Yeah,
And
2022.
just being a spectator, just watching you work, continuously grind, seeing the projects that you have really put out there. I honestly think Nicholas probably has his handprints on almost every nook and cranny, almost every space in Trinidad and Tobago, from east, west, north, south, central. Nick has some work in the public space that you have really been bringing to life. And again, it's just been a joy to watch you go through this entire journey. And you've crafted this style that has been adopted with many brands and many different companies. So, I mean, we'll dive into that. But again, I just wanted to say it's really just been a pleasure just watching you work and really put your imprint on the entire country.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What I love too is that when you see it, you know that's a Nicholas Huggins creative piece.
That's a Nick.
It's very distinctive. That is, and that's not something that is easy to accomplish.
No, definitely not. That is something that you have to work a lot on.
I can imagine.
So let's start off. I mean, let's start by just learning more about you. For the people who have probably never heard your name or seen you, they've probably seen your work but don't know who is the person behind it. Let's give some people some background insights. So just start off by sharing your journey into the art world and what initially sparked your interest in graphic design and illustration.
Sure. So like many people, I did art in secondary school. I went to St. Mary's College. And I did art all the way up to Form 6. So I did art for CXE, then I did art for CAPE. And when I was coming down to the end of Upper 6, my art teacher at the time was like, you should really consider going to an art and design university. And so I was kind of in two minds. I was doing art, geography, and environmental science. And I was kind of like looking into going into maybe like some sort of environmental science field. But eventually, kind of took the plunge. I said, cool, art and design it is, because that really was where my passions lied. And so I had the opportunity to study abroad. I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design, otherwise known as SCAD. So I went to SCAD for 4 years. At that point, I had never really used Photoshop or Illustrator. I didn't own my own computer, so I didn't really have any sort of experience in terms of anything to do with any digital realms of art. But when I got to university, I wasn't too sure what I was gonna do as my major, and I was taking a few like introductory classes, and I eventually took an intro to graphic design class, and that was kind of the first time I started using all these Adobe programs and that kind of thing. And from there, I really fell in love with it. I think that within the terms of creativity, I like graphic design because there's so many rules that you have to follow. There's so many rules involved in graphic design, and I quite like working within these certain constraints. And I think that once you know the rule, I was speaking to someone about this. Once you know the rules, you then can learn how to break them in the right way, right? So I decided, I was like, you could kind of learn to paint, you could learn to draw, you could learn all these things kind of as you go. But because graphic design, there were so many rules involved, I was like, that's what I want to study and actually learn from these experts, And so I studied graphic design, came back home to Trinidad after my 4 years after I graduated. And from there, I actually was kind of unsure if I wanted to become a freelancer, if I wanted to work in-house. And I made what I think is a good decision to get a graphic design position within a company. So I worked as the in-house graphic designer for a company called Restaurant Holdings Limited. And I was basically designing for their brands, which at the time were Burger King and Popeyes. So I was designing all the Facebook posts and posters and menu boards and stuff for these two restaurants. And I worked there for about a year. Then I got an opportunity to work at McCann, which is one of the biggest advertising agencies in the Caribbean. And when an opportunity like that comes up, you have to take it, right? So I then worked at McCann for about 2.5 years, kind of learning the ins and outs of what it takes to operate within an advertising agency and within a creative agency on the whole. And I suggest to like young people now all the time, I was like, go work in an advertising agency. You will learn good work ethic, you'll learn what good work is, and you learn how to operate within clients and within a sort of hierarchy of an agency setup. So I suggest to people to go all the time, and that was almost like another education unto itself. I was there for about 2.5 years. And on the side, I was like waking up super early in the morning, working on teaching myself illustration, going to bed late at night, working on freelance projects. So that was kind of like my real kind of like hustle phase of my life, right? Which kind of hasn't stopped, to be honest, but that was the start of it. And so I was working on the freelance stuff. And then when I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I've kind of taken a lot of knowledge from being in this agency. I've gotten a lot of freelance clients. I felt at that time, which was in 2017, I was like, I could kind of go off on my own now. I feel like I have the necessary tools. And that was kind of the introduction to me forming Backyard Design and kind of getting to where I am now.
I'm curious
How
though,
fitting. Go ahead. I just wanted to throw something out. I also wanted to say that, how fitting is it that you went to a school called Savannah, Savannah College?
I know.
I wanted to dive a bit more into, what made you officially realize like now is the time to branch out and do your own thing, because this also happened, pre-COVID when everybody started their own business and this and the other, but you're also in a space that is not just competitive, but it's also a space where I think a lot of graphic designers are, they know they're good at what they do. They are very skilled at what they do, but graphic designers as well also tend to get a bit of flack in that their skill isn't as appreciated. And for me, I'm just trying to figure out, like, at what point did you realize, okay, yes, I've built up all this experience and all of that, and I should go out on my own versus just staying at McCann? That's what I want to kind of focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time kind of like run any numbers. I was like, how many logos I have to design this month if I want to make the same salary? Like, I spent a lot of time doing that. And I got to a point where my freelance work was almost on par with my salary. And I knew that I literally physically could not do any more work because of time, right? And I also knew that in order for me to grow to a point where I was charging what I ultimately would want to be charging, I would have to kind of gain that experience. It could no longer be a side hustle. It had to be kind of my main focus. And basically at the time, like I was still living at home with my dad. It wasn't that big of a risk financially because I knew that like I wouldn't end up on the street or whatever if all failed, right? I also knew that I was still young and I was still at an age and with a certain skill level where I was still very hireable. So if I took it on and it didn't work after 6 months, I could always get another job and I wouldn't really be in dire straits because I still had like this fallback of I live at home with my dad. I wasn't married. I didn't have that many expenses. So it was that kind of perfect timing of I could have taken a risk, and if it didn't work, I had a fallback, and if it did work, well, I then had everything to gain from it, you know?
It's a calculated risk.
Definitely, yeah.
Graphic design has become extremely commoditized. When you think about the freelancing platforms like freelancer.com, Upwork, Fiverr, if you want to get a graphic, you can get a graphic done for $3.99, right? When you look at the graphic design industry and you see that, okay, people can get graphic designs done from anywhere, they can get it done cheaply, you know, how does one kind of set themselves apart to kind of charge what they want to charge? Because I mean, I see the complaints from graphic designers all the time. Graphic designers will jump online and talk about, hey, you know what? Organizations, don't use Fiverr. Fiverr is no good. Don't use AI to create your illustrations because AI is no good. And I look at that and I'm like, yo, listen, from a business perspective, businesses should be leveraging those things when they need to, but when they need to get something specific, when they need to get some real quality work, to me, that's when you call Nick Huggins and you pay Nick Huggins money, right?
Yeah.
So, how does and I'm saying this for the graphic designers out there, like how do you kind of separate yourself from the commodity to really build yourself to where you're at to kind of charge what you want to charge?
Yeah, so I think there's two different kind of thoughts happening here, right? So there's the thought of the whole thing with like Fiverr and these like really affordable sort of design solutions. In my opinion, it's like buying a t-shirt. Like you could go to Target and buy a t-shirt for $3, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It may not last as long as you'd want it to last, or it may go out of style really quickly, or whatever the case is. Or you could go to a store and buy a t-shirt for $200. Like there's every range of t-shirts. And at the end of the day, depending on what you need and whatever your budget is, that's at the end of the day what you need and what your budget is, right? So if your budget is $5 for a logo and you literally can't afford it, then use one of these platforms, because a lot of times people start businesses and they may not necessarily prioritize their branding. And then they get to a point where maybe they start making some money, they start becoming well known, and then they know, okay, cool, well, now's the time we need to do a rebrand because people are now starting to get where we are. And maybe that's the point where they come to me. And to be honest with you, a lot of my work, I do a lot of rebrands where people have either done it themselves or worked with someone who may have been like really young or inexperienced or whatever the case is. And then they get to a point where they do it, right? So I don't really look at these things as like a hindrance to the design community. At the end of the day, like there need to be offerings for everyone across any budget scope, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, as far as how do you get to a point where you're being able to like charge higher or whatever the case is, I think it comes down to two things. You building your own brand within the design community. And that's kind of also tied into the second thing, which is being able to properly explain the value proposition. So this is the value that I'm bringing to someone, So for instance, you might go to someone for a $5 logo and that's literally they just send you a logo on over email and you have no interaction with them, whatever. You just kind of fill out a form and they send you a logo, right? Whereas you might work with a more experienced designer and you might get, and it'll be a bit more expensive, but you get that personal experience. They are communicating with you throughout the process. You have several in-person meetings with them. They're sending you mood boards. They have a certain amount of changes that you could do. So it takes a lot more, right? Because the value proposition is higher. So therefore, the cost to the client has to be higher as well. And once I think you could communicate at the start of the project, because someone might see a price and say, wait, boy, that's real plenty. But once you could say, yeah, but with this price, you're getting XYZ, and here's all the work that I've done before, and you have something to stand up on and talk with your chest, as we say, and say this is why the cost is the cost. Then I think people would then start to understand, right? And obviously, I look at like younger designers. I myself was a young designer. I still kind of consider myself a young designer, right? But you know, like when I was first starting out, I did a lot of jobs where, and I know there's a sort of thing in design whether you should work for free or whatever the case is. I Up to now, I do some jobs for free, depending on whether it's for friends or whether it's an exchange, like a bartering thing. I don't mind doing that, and I think that for younger designers to do some work for free for clients who may not have a budget, but you think you could do a better job than, let's say, a Fiverr, I think that's a really good in. Or do some sort of bartering thing where you barter your services for whatever their goods or services are. So there's all these different ways to kind of get this experience without necessarily having to do work that you don't want to do, you know?
You hit a lot of key points, and I think again, if you're listening in and you are either a designer or your kids or your friends or family members are designers, this is a very important thought process, because like I said, I see it all the time, far too often, where designers would rather belittle the freelancing platforms or belittle AI. And I always use you as a benchmark. I'm like, yo, listen, the tools like the freelancing platforms and AI, those are there for what they're there for. But where you should be striving is look at a guy like Nicholas Huggins, where he has now separated himself from being a commodity. He has his own brand. So you know, if I need a $5 logo for now, because this is what the budget is, Fiverr is there or AI is there for that. That's what I could do. That's where my hat could reach right now. But where you need to be is where you need to be, where you're no longer a commodity, so that when somebody decides, okay, I already know we have the money, everything has aligned, now we need to take things up a notch. That is when you call a Nicholas Huggins, and you're not calling him before that, right? So what you broke down is perfect, and I'm glad you said it, because I know there's a lot of people that need to hear that information. Ricolia.
Yeah, no, I think you, Nicholas, you actually answered a question that I had for you, which was, how do you go about, I don't want to say justifying, but, showing your value? From speaking with a lot of uh, graphic designer friends that I have, I know one of their biggest frustrations is, of course, you may get to work for the McCanns of the world and all of that, but when you're also uh, getting called in for other jobs as well, more often than not, you still have a mindset for a lot of businesses where they don't understand the value, or they don't understand what goes into creating in the way that, that you guys do. And they want to pay well below market value. So I'm really glad that you highlighted that. And I also wanted to make another note as well in terms of, as you rightly said, Keron, like not knocking the Fivers of things, because if you are now coming up in the game as a graphic designer, you're not necessarily getting those immediate jobs and commitments and all of that. You're also building international experience as well, which, and I think that's something that tends to be a bit missed sometimes, is not just the international but building experience. A lot of people want to see what you're doing, and if you can just show that range and that diversity, it definitely helps as an interim until you can get through with whatever locally and all of that. Nicholas, I have a question for you, and I think it's something that a lot of creatives tend to struggle with a bit, is how do you balance the creative and being an artist with being a business owner? Because those can be a bit on completely different ends of the spectrum and all of that. So, knowing when to start to put on your business hat on and be like, I'm not being driven by feelings and what I like and that sort of thing. And this is what we have to do. So how do you manage the balance between the two?
Yeah, I'd say it's not easy, and I'd also say that it's not for everyone. Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, like you too could be a business owner. It's like it's something that I would say is something that needs to be very thoughtfully considered, whether or not that's your skill set, or whether or not if you want to start a business, whether or not it's something that you have to maybe join a partnership with someone else who maybe has those skill sets, or whatever the case is, right? Um, I would say that like I'm always trying to learn how to be better. I speak to other business owners. I speak to other designers who also have their own design businesses, and I'm kind of constantly trying to learn and better myself. I know I'm not like personally not maybe not the perfect epitome of every single thing, but I'm always trying to be aware of where my weak points are and trying to either be better at those things or to maybe outsource or get someone else to kind of manage those things that I'm not good at, right?
Mm.
In terms of like being a creative and being an entrepreneur at the same time, I've always been encouraged by like my parents, like start even though neither of my parents had when I was growing up own their own businesses, they would always encourage me like start your own business, like this is the way to make money in this world or whatever the case is. So I've always been encouraged, and even when I was in CIC, I remember I used to like screen print t-shirts and sell it to like other students. So I've always been trying to figure out how do I monetize what I'm good at? How do I make a business of what I'm good at? And luckily, my what I'm good at and what I'm interested in is in the creative field, and I've been able to some degree of success, be able to make a business of that as well.
I love that.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. How now? One of the biggest things that has impacting every single industry, and I mean it's greatly impacting your industry as well, is the role of artificial intelligence. From where you sit, how has AI impacted the design industry? But then how do you, as a designer with your agency, how do you navigate the use of AI? Do you incorporate AI into what you're doing? Has AI been able to help you be a better artist and do things better? How has AI kind of impacted the design industry? And then how are you navigating the use of AI? Is it something that's threatening your business? What are your thoughts on that as well?
So that's a great question. I think that as far as how I see AI affecting kind of the creative industry, it's definitely happening, I
Yeah.
mean, AI is affecting every aspect of life, right?
Everything.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
So to say it's not affecting a particular industry would be the wrong thing to say, but it's definitely coming in. I see a lot of pages now where it's like a ton of AI art, or it's a people using AI to design their packaging design or whatever the case is. I think that AI is still at a point where it's sort of that uncanny valley where when you see it, you kind of know something's off, like something's a little bit wrong. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely affecting the industry. As of right now, I can't say how it's affected me personally or my business personally, but like I definitely see like even local brands using AI in their social media marketing. So by just looking at that, I know that if they're using AI photography in their marketing, I know that that's affecting a photographer who otherwise would have gotten that job to shoot that campaign or whatever the case is. So I would say, but that's also kind of the role that like brands like Shutterstock and these other stock photography websites play as well. It's just making it a little bit easier for companies to get exactly what they want. Because as you know, you go on Shutterstock, you look for a carnival image, it's very hard to find. So you then have to hire a local photographer to shoot these carnival images, right? And so the photographer will get paid for that. Now with AI, you could basically input a prompt and get exactly what you want with the exact lighting, with the exact brand colors, and etc. etc. So of course it's affecting. Um, as far as how I've been using AI in my own work, I really right now just kind of use AI to help me write emails and like write other things, and I use it for a lot of those type of things where I'd write something and I just talk to ChatGPT and say, how can we make this a little bit tighter and get my ideas across a little bit better? So I use it to help sometimes with my writing. Um, Sometimes if I'm looking for, let's say, a reference image of something, I may use uh, Midjourney or one of these to kind of help me get in the same way that I would have typically used like a stock website to, if I'm looking for something very particular, like if I need to do an illustration of a hot air balloon, that's not something I could go out and photograph very easily. But I could go on Shutterstock, or I could use AI and get a reference image that I could then like do my drawing from. Now, I don't personally use AI in terms of any of my artistic creations, because at the end of the day, I believe that the value of my work lies in the fact that I've created this thing, you know. So I'm not using it to that extent. Like AI isn't really touching my work outside of maybe just
the referencing.
yeah, using it as references or whatever the case is. That being said, I have spent the last 10 years building a personal brand. So I think that the reason why people may hire me or like even with my art practice, right? The reason why people would buy my art is because they want that narrative. They want that sort of provenance of work to say, like, you know, this is Nick made this is how he made it, da 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 da. And I think that's where a lot of value of art comes from, is within the story of that art. And I think that if you buy a print of an AI art, it kind of lacks that story unless there's something uniquely done about it. So I think that at the end of the day, for a lot of artists, the value of the art kind of lies within the creation, the story, the narrative, the provenance of that piece. It's the same way that like you could go to, I'll use Walmart as an example instead of Target. So you go to Walmart and buy a big print for your wall of a beach or something for $15, and you don't really know where that came from, and you don't really know who made it, and it's just a million other people have it in their house. And that's kind of what I relate kind of like AI art to some degree, you know.
I just want to touch
Perfect.
back, mention about social media, seeing, businesses use it a bit more. I've also noticed that as well. Like it's a interesting space because I always say that if you're using AI well or to the best of your ability, you're not really supposed to be able to tell. So you have some pieces of artwork that, they're done well and there are a few tweaks and you're like, okay, I can see that's AI. And then there's some that it's obvious that it was just, quickly churned out and posted to social. Do you think, or do you foresee that impacting, not necessarily for you, because you have definitely carved out a space for yourself where I don't foresee that being problematic for you in the foreseeable future. But do you foresee that being problematic in terms of how we're going to be going about marketing now, where we say a lot businesses may be saying, well, I don't necessarily need to hire a graphic designer. I'm just going to churn out something from an AI generated image, and all we're going to be seeing is AI content in our marketing going forward. Do you think that's a possibility? Do you think that it's just a matter of we are just also experimenting with AI as it stands?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said kind of answers the question, which is like, if the AI is done well, you can't
Mm,
really tell. But if the AI
yeah.
isn't done well, you can tell. So I think that what you'll probably end up happening is like these let's call them content creators for the sake of it, who probably go out and shoot and create content now for brands. Content creators will just have to become really good at developing prompts. And in the same way that the businesses are outsourcing their design or their photography or whatever, they're probably just going to outsource that. And these people who are creating this content, they're probably going to just have to get really good at using these AI platforms, because the brands may be wanting them to use that. So it may not necessarily be that they are out of a job, but they'll probably be out. Like they'll probably have to just adjust what their skill set is in order to create this. Because someone has to create the content, right? The main reason why
Yeah.
brands hire content creators or graphic designers was because they don't either have the time or the skill set to do it themselves. So they're probably still not going to have the time or the skill set to create this AI content, you know. So it's probably just going to come down to whoever these designers are or whoever's creating the content to be able to learn how to kind of shift their profession or switch their skill sets.
I honestly, I love what Nick has said, because the way I see it, I want businesses to use AI when they can. This increases the value of Nick because the reality is, if you want something done cheap, if you want it done fast, go use AI. Come to me when you have a real job, and that price, you're going to pay the price because you have the cheap options. So there's something for you to go and send people to, right? But then when you're coming back to me, so I think this increases the value of the Nicholases of the world. So for all of the graphic designers, the illustrators who feel threatened by more businesses that are using AI, I don't want you to feel threatened. I want you to start carving your space out. Look at what Nick has done. Carve your space out. Understand that these cheaper options are here for a reason, because you know what? People have budgets. And if the budget calls for something to be done quick, to be churned up fast, you have those options. But then when you get that phone call, if you've built your brand and you've carved out your space, you're going to be able to call the price that you want if you have built up your value and carved out that space correctly. Now, we've talked about the business, we've talked about AI. Let's get into why we are here. Nick has the upcoming field trip exhibition happening tomorrow. So, Nick, what inspired the theme of your upcoming exhibition field trip?
That's a good question. So I basically just write down potential names of exhibitions and pieces and that type of thing year round. So I have a note on my phone that's just full of names, and I get it from different places. I might just come across like a line in a book, or I might come across a line in a song, and I just sort of always just collect these sort of things that I come across. And I was talking to someone, and they were talking about, remember when we used to go on field trips in school, and I was like, hey, that field trip, that might be a cool concept, a cool name for something. I wasn't sure what at the moment, right? And so I wrote it down, added it to my list. And I had a few other names for the exhibition I was toying with. And so like another one was Wish You Were Here, which kind of is a kind of ode to like postcards and that sort of like nostalgic kind of vibe, right? So, and I think field trip also kind of has that sort of nostalgic feeling, and it's kind of like as a student in the Caribbean, you always went on field trips. It was always an exciting day, right? And then I also wanted to give it the meaning of like, this is a field trip into my creativity. Like I'm taking you on a field trip of what I do, like so that's kind of where the concept and where the name sort of came from in the beginning.
So I'm curious, what goes into I've always been curious about this on a whole, but now that I have, you here, what goes into curating pieces for an exhibition, considering, the extensive work that you have? Is it just simply based on, okay, well, let me just put in what falls under this theme or like the name of the exhibition, or is there a bit more that goes into the curation process?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a bit more. So I actually started creating new work after I got the name, right? So
Mm.
the all the work in the show. So I had an exhibition last year, and that was more of me curating my best work of the 10 years of my professional career. And then for this exhibition, I decided I wanted to it's the first year out of that 10-year period, right? So this is the first year out, and I kind of knew what I wanted to show. And so I worked a lot on sketches, I worked a lot on concepts. And from there, I kind of developed the name and the concept and the idea. And then I basically worked on all of the pieces for that. So it is really a matter of like curating as you create, right? And there's a lot of things that I was working on, and I was like, do I really want to spend time working on this when I'm like, it may not be within the theme, or it may not be good enough, or whatever the case is. So that's kind of how I went about creating the pieces for this particular exhibition. It was really more of, I had a theme, I had an idea of what I wanted to show, I had kind of an idea of the amount of pieces, and I do mixed media as well. So I'm doing digital pieces, I'm doing drawings, I'm doing block prints, I'm doing these different things. So I also kind of knew the amount of each thing that I wanted to show, and then I kind of worked from there.
Talk to us
Brilliant.
about some of the pieces that are going to be on display, because again, you have this theme, and the way honestly, when I seen the idea and some of the work that you put out, my thought process was Nick was, bored one day. He jumped in his car and headed down. He stopped off at a double stand. He went and got a drink around the savannah. He went and did something over here. And then here we go. We literally went on his field trip with Nick, and he is just taking all of these different, everyday things that we see and turn it into this work of art. So talk to us about some of the pieces that are going to be on display tomorrow.
Sure, yeah. So I have a series of 24 drawings of houses around Trinidad, and you're right. I do jump in my car mostly on a Sunday when there's no traffic, and I go out and I take photos of things and I look for inspiration, and it's always a nice little, like a nice outing. Stop, get a coffee, drive around, take pictures. So that is kind of how the process goes, right? Um, within my work, I'm constantly looking for sort of like the beauty in the mundane, right? There's a photographer that I
Mm.
love. His name is William Eggleston, and he was American. He's one of the first photographers, fine art photographers, to really show work in color, which at the time everyone was showing work in black and white. And his photography was about photographing, finding the beauty in the mundane, right? But it's very like American, Americana. And I was like, how can I find the beauty in the sort of overlooked things of Trinidad and Tobago, like the things that we see every day, but we may take for granted. And that's sort of where my passion lies, because I think that there's so much beauty around us. And I feel like I'm one of the people that I'm trying to show this to everyone. Like, look at how beautiful these breeze blocks are. Look at how beautiful this wrought iron fence is. Look at how beautiful this snow cone vendor's cart is with the typography on the side. These sort of like overlooked daily things, right? So that's sort of what I try to do with my art. As far as the pieces in the show, I have these 24 drawings, which I think will be a really nice addition to anyone's collection, for instance. And then I have about 20 digital pieces. And the digital pieces are really what kind of tell the story of the field trip. The first piece in the show, the first digital piece in the show is called High Hope. And it's based on kind of close to where I live. And it's like you get a nice view of the St. Anne's Valley. There's some houses on the hill. There's a man in a boat. There's a hummingbird, because you have a lot of hummingbirds around where we live. And so that's sort of, I wanted to show where I live, because that's sort of the start of the day, the start of the field trip. And, and then the last piece of the show is actually called End of the Line, right? And so it goes from the morning all the way to the night. And end of the line is another digital piece. And in between that, with all the digital pieces, I try to tell a story of a day throughout, like what could be a field trip throughout the day, and where you venture around Trinidad. So that's kind of the process within which I sort of built this exhibition, I'd say.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm curious. So it's coming a bit away from the exhibition itself and just, speaking to your style and, what motivates and inspires you and all of that. I believe that when it comes to Trinidad culture, I'm using air quotes here for the while, I realize that it's very subjective. What, Karen may identify as Trini culture may be very different from what I consider to be Trini culture, what you may consider. So you mentioned earlier, you find beauty in the mundane, but what are some of the like other tangible elements of Trini culture that inspires your style?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super inspired by our music. I'm super inspired by Carnival for sure. Even with any colors that I use in my work, it's really inspired by us as a people, and sort of Carnival, which to me is one of the greatest inventions of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I definitely take um I definitely take inspiration from what's around me, and what feels real and what feels true to me, that I sort of take from Trinidad and Tobago. And I feel like I take this inspiration, and then I give back my art to sort of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's done through my prints, that's done through my public display works, wherever, whether it's in like Eastgate Mall or C3 or wherever. I'm constantly trying to beautify the place. That's kind of what I see as my life goal. But beautify the place in a way that reflects us as a people. And I don't really like. I have my own meaning to my work and in a lot of my pieces, but a lot of times I don't like to tell people what that meaning is. I like for you to assign me meaning. So there was a piece that I did at my exhibition last year, and to me, that piece represented the North Coast, and every single person had a different thought of where it could be. And that's what I like. I want to reflect back to you what you want to see. I don't want to tell you, oh, this is XYZ or whatever the case is. That's why a lot of my pieces, it's not really distinguishable where in Trinidad it is or where in the Caribbean it is. It's just very Like, I want you to kind of figure that out and create that story in your mind, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I think one of the biggest collaborations that nobody talks about enough is the collaboration with Kester Band and Nicholas Huggins. That is a collaboration where it literally looks and feels like a match made in heaven. Talk to us a bit about the work that you do with Kester Band, you know, how you have been able to it really is like a merge. Like it the work that you've done for Kess, it just feels like Kess.
When I
And
first saw it, it was like that makes sense.
it
That
just
makes
makes
perfect
sense.
sense. Yeah.
It just makes sense. Talk to us a bit about, you know, some of the work that you do with Kess and you know why that collaboration has been so successful.
Yeah, so I first started working with Cass in 2020, which was during the pandemic. And he had, if you remember, in 2020, we still had Carnival, right? So I was creating a lot of Carnival-based
Yeah.
content at the time. I was just doing illustrations of Carnival characters and singers and that kind of thing. And I'd done a drawing of Cass, and somebody must have shared it with him. And he actually DM'd me and was like, send me your number. We have to work on something. So I sent him my number, and didn't hear anything. I was like, all right, cool, whatever. And then like literally like maybe that was in February, and then he reached out to me in July, right?
Mhm.
And that's when he was working on his live album, We Home, right? And basically he's like, I have this concept and this is what it is and whatever, whatever, whatever. And that was kind of the start of that. And he had basically asked me to do the cover art for that album. And I felt so inspired by the music. I felt so inspired by what I was working on. I ended up creating the cover for the album as well as 4 single artworks as well, right? So I
Mm.
think from that we actually ended up doing five unique artworks, 4 for the songs and 1 for the album itself, you know. And that to me is one of the best soca albums that you could listen to, you know. It's like a best hits, but then it's live, it's incredible, right? So it was really an honor to be able to work with that. And then, you know, we kind of continued, and every now and then we'd collaborate on a song. So like I did the artwork for Jolene, I did the artwork for Licky Ticky and the Licky Ticky remix, and we kind of have continued this relationship throughout. I also did the original artwork for Iswe, and as well as the logo for Iswe after it rebranded from Tuesday on the Rock. So I've been working with Kes for quite a bit, and hopefully it's a collaboration that could come back around and we work on something else in the future, you know, because working with those guys is always incredible. I always love working with other creatives because you hear what their ideas are, you kind of filter those ideas and you process it. And especially with someone who's not in the visual field, but is still a creative, like a musician, it's always really fun and really interesting to work on something, you know?
Well said, well said. Yeah, like I said, I think when there are a few times, just like what we said at the start of the show, when you see a Nicholas Huggins piece, you know it's a Nicholas Huggins piece. And when the artwork started coming in for Cass, you know, during Carnival and all of that, I'm like, it was a match made in heaven, but it just feels as if you guys, and you just said it, you guys sort of fed off each other to produce this, and it just sort of was this amazing sort of like pop art. It reminded me of, oh my gosh, what's the name of this pop artist from this thing, the 60s and 70s?
Andy
Um
Warhol.
yes. I
Yeah.
kind of got like that energy as well, but of course with a Trini or Trimbigonian slant. And of course by extension that means that, you know, between, you know, the Google Doodles and everything that you're doing, you're going further and further, and it's bringing you to a more global audience, you know. How do you maintain your authentic style for a global audience? Because as Karen would have said at the start, you know, something like graphic design has become very much commodified over the years, and it's very easy for that to happen with a lot of our culture as well. And then you also have a lot of other brands out there and entities and all these different people who and businesses who are pushing Trimbigonian culture. So how are you able, or at least how do you think you're able to maintain your style and, you know, your level of authenticity, and it still feels like authentically Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, to me, I think that word authenticity is one of the most important things in any creative field. You know, I think that when you stay authentic to yourself and when you're creating work that feels authentic to you, I think people could tell. They may not be able to like say exactly what it is or what they're feeling or whatever the case is, but I think that um, there's a certain like soul or spirit within your artwork that you could only really get if you are authentic to yourself and authentic to your to your art, you know. So I think for me, well, first of all, I'd say that I'm fortunate in that a lot of people, when they hire me, it's because they want my style and they want what I
Mm.
do. They're not coming to me and being like, I want you to do something that looks exactly like this. Because at that point, then just hire an artist on Fiverr or whatever. Like that's not my that's not my forte, right? My forte is I want you to hire me because you respect and you like what I do, right? So I've kind of carved out a little thing for myself where now when people hire me to do work, it's because of those things, you know. And what's interesting is like I do jobs for really big corporate clients, and this is what people don't understand as well. It's like you're not trying to sell to like if you're an artist and you do murals and you want to do commercial work, you don't necessarily need to sell to the owner of the business. You need to sell to the employees, and the employees will then sell to the business owner and be like, hey, we need to work with this guy because of XYZ. And
Mm.
if enough of the people that work there say that and the decision makers are hearing that, then all of a sudden the decision makers become interested. And I was on a call with a client once, and I had inserted something into this mural I was doing, and the guy who was, I guess, the decision maker, let's call him, of the project, they were asking why I did that. And before I could answer, one of his employees on the marketing team jumped in and was like, well, that's actually like a signature piece of Nick's work. And like when that could only happen if you are communicating properly to your audience, that your
Yeah.
audience could then communicate to other people as well, right? And that to me is when I kind of saw the value of, okay, like if I send something to someone and they have a question about it, they can maybe ask someone who knows about me and they can answer that question. I don't need to be there to defend my creative decisions because I've spoken about it so much, you know. So I think that's a really interesting anecdote and something that people could kind of think about, you know.
You made a very good point where you don't want people to come to you and say, hey, we want something like this and try to recreate it. You want people to come to you for what you do. And I think that's very important. But that takes a lot of innovation. That takes the ability to believe in your own skill sets and believe in believe in the work that you do. And that's something that a lot of designers kind of struggle with. They kind of cave to the pressures of trying to, somebody comes to them and says, we want this, and it's not their style, and they know that they're not going to do it justice because it's really outside of their scope. So what is what is the advice you would give to a designer when it comes to kind of being able to kind of stick to your guns and stick to your strengths, and being able to turn down things that are really outside of your scope, that if you could do it, but it's not going to be your best work, and it's really not going to look the best, but what is your advice to those people to kind of stand on their own grounds and stick to their skill sets and their guns?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that comes with time and comes with experience. I don't think that's something that you're 1 year out of design school or you're 1 year into your career and you're going to be doing that, right? You like, I would say straight up, in my first few years as a designer, I was taking on things that maybe I wasn't the best fit for, or that they were like, we wanted to look like XYZ and you just kind of have to do it, and maybe you don't feel confident arguing with the client or trying to convince them otherwise, right? So it's definitely something that comes with practice, comes with time, comes with experience, you know. I've done a lot of projects where I didn't really want to do it, but it's because, I have a team, I have responsibilities to my team that I'm not just turning down money, and you know what I mean? But like you try to get to that point where it's like, okay, the goal is that 5 out of every 10 projects, they're hiring me because they want my style. And then 8 out of every 10 projects, they hired me because they want my style, you know? So even for me, like now I work on things, and even like within the mural space, like most times the client brings me a brief, right? And I want to get to a point now where I'm like, the client just like gives me carte blanche to do whatever I want, and I could come to them and be like, this is what we're doing, and they take it. Whereas I'm not at that level just yet, right? So like that's the next step. So I think that just think about it in terms of steps, and it's just something to kind of work towards. Like, you're not going to be 1 year out of school and being like, I too good for that style or that whatever, you know, like you have to do the work, you have to put in the time, and then you can make those kind of calls.
Do you have any, I mean, of course, you've been able to work with so many different like well-known brands and bands and that sort of thing, but are there any dream clients or dream individuals you would love to work with?
That is a great question. And that's a good question. I would say I would love to do some sort of like sneaker collaboration with like a Nike or an Adidas or something. I'd say
Ah,
that would be
I can,
something really, really cool.
yeah.
yeah.
Especially to be able to like attach Trinidadian culture to the like sneaker world, I think would be really interesting. Not that it's not been done, but to do it in my own way, I think would be really cool. Um, Outside of that, I don't really know. I'd say that would probably be like a dream client.
You know, as you say that, with some of the brands you've worked with, like a Hennessy, like a Johnny Walker, you know,
Johnny Walker,
Johnny,
Angostura, yeah.
yes. How do you strike that balance between what their brand guidelines are and what your style is, and then meet in the middle so that it fits what they need, but it's still you. Like we could still look at a Johnny Walker and be like, well, Nick did that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, once again, I would give a call back to what we spoke about at first, which is when I said that, I went into graphic design to learn the rules, and
Yeah.
then now I know how to kind of break the rules a little bit, right? So I studied graphic design, so I know how to read brand guidelines. I understand branding, right? So when a brand comes to me, I am not gonna. I know initially exactly what needs to be done. Yeah, there might be a little thing like, oh, we need to use less of this color because this is a competitor's color, or we need to add in more of this color because whatever the reason is, So I I'm coming from a starting point of understanding branding and understanding how brands want to be portrayed. But a lot of times with these projects, for instance, like let's say I did an 1824 canister for Angostura a few years ago, like they're coming to me with kind of a like somewhat of a they'll give me a creative brief, but they'll be like, this is what we want, and I might propose like a color palette or whatever the case is. And at the end of the day, with my work, I don't mind changing color palettes if they don't like it. I don't mind making changes or whatever the case is. I understand that is all part of it. And I understand that at the end of the day, if a brand hires you, it's ultimately their money that's funding this. It's their name that's going on this. And so I don't mind doing a little back and forth and getting to a point where the client is 100% happy with it. Because at the end of the day, you do a good job for a client, they then become an ambassador of your brand. They then say, oh yeah, we worked with Nick, we had a great experience with him, he really worked to get something we love. So that's how I want everyone who works with me to sort of leave the experience.
Mm.
Outside of, of course, clients would provide briefs. You have a bit of a framework in which to work within, but have there ever been any uh, projects that have really challenged you creatively?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, um, I
And you
would
don't have
say
to call
one
it
of
a different kind of position too.
no, 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 definitely not, definitely not. I'm always like, I always say that if a job makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable at the start, like it's a good job because it'll make you be better at the end of it, right? If
Mm.
if you're getting jobs and you're like, yeah, doing this in my sleep, then yeah, you've maybe rested on your laurels a little bit. So I quite enjoy taking on these jobs that I'm like, how am I gonna do this? So I'd say one of the projects that really pushed me was the mural at C3 Center. And
Mm.
the reason that
Mm.
was really challenging is because of the scale of it and also the amount of things that the clients wanted included. So they basically
Right.
gave me a list of like 30 things that kind of reflected Trinidad and Tobago cultures like carnival, steel pan, scarlet ibis, and it was like
Everything.
literally everything. So it's super challenging to fit all these things into one artwork, right? Luckily, it was a super wide artwork. It was like maybe like 250 feet wide by 15 feet tall. So I had a lot of width to work with, right? Um, but being able to fit all those things into one artwork was really challenging. And anyone from South, I encourage you, go to C3 Center and see how many things you could find in that mural, because it is really it's like a Where's Waldo of
Yeah.
Trinidad and Tobago, you know? So yeah. And that job required a lot of sketching, a lot of research, like so much went into that. So I'd say that is one job that at the start I was kind of like, should I try to convince the client to like not do this because it's so much? But I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? Let me try, and if I really can't figure it out, then I tell them. But I think that it's figure outable, and it turned out that it was.
It was, and everything
Yeah.
blends really well into that as well. So like, was there a bit of work that had to go into that and like showcase it? Okay, I have all this space to work with, but what is the story and the through line with all of these elements? What did a lot have to go into that?
A lot went into that. So I kind of tried to break it up in terms of like location. So it goes from like North Trinidad, it kind of goes to like Central and South, and then Tobago, and then it's three pieces in one, and then it's kind of brought together. So it's two long pieces, one short piece that kind of come together to make the entire thing. So the small piece in the middle, that was Carnival, because I was like, Carnival is what connects us all, right? So that's why I put Carnival in the middle, and then everything kind of comes out of that, you know. So there was a lot of thought that went into it, and there was a lot of trial and error in terms of like how exactly to visually connect all these things, you know.
It was well done.
Between the mural, working with Angostura, Kestaban, Caribbean Airlines, it feels as if Trinidad and Tobago is going through a rebrand itself, and Nick is the architect behind this rebrand, because it when you look at your work, you can feel the essence of what it is to be what it is to be Trinbagonian. You know, how does it feel for you to be in this position where you are leading the charge on this nationwide rebrand of TNT and how we are showing up to the world?
Yeah, I mean, to say I'm leading the charge, that feels like a big thing, and I definitely feel like there are a lot of other artists and creatives out there who are doing their part, and I just see myself as part of this whole story of Trinidad and Tobago and story of visuals, right? I actually did not design the Caribbean Airlines campaign, right? But a lot of people have thought it was me, but I have to correct people about this all the time. It actually wasn't me. Um,
Interesting.
I believe it may have been done in-house, but I'm not really 100% sure. Um, yeah,
Wow. You see
but
when your style speaks, you see when your style speaks for yourself?
yeah,
Because when
yeah,
I seen it, like everybody else, I was like, okay, this is definitely a Nick piece. But yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, so it's clearly served as a bit of advertising for me to some degree. But no, I'll clearly air on record that I was not the artist behind that. I'm not 100% sure who was. So if you're listening and you are, you could let me know. So when I correct people, I could let them know who it actually was.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I think that there's a lot of different things and a lot of different brands that are doing really cool things. And you know, it's something that I speak to brands all the time, and I always try to get them. I'm like, the back to the word authenticity. I'm like, how do we connect with people authentically as brands, as personal brands, as corporate brands, or whatever the case is? And I think that if it's one thing that everyone loves, no matter what, even if they don't really know it, is art. And I think that brands are in a position, because if you think about it, brands own so much visual space in this country with billboards, right? So
Yeah.
brands are in a position where they could really democratize access to arts and creativity by using their billboards or billboard space or ad spending to really showcase artists in the country, you know. So whenever I talk to brands, that's always something that I'm kind of pushing and encouraging, because I think that that would feel authentic, and that would feel like a true support and a true give back to both artists and to people who just love seeing art. You know, I'd rather see art driving down the highway than like just another ad. You know what I mean? So I think that
Yeah.
that's kind of like my vision for Trinidad and Tobago, and a vision for our public spaces as well.
I'm curious. So as we already established, you've of course carved out a very distinct space for yourself where you are providing and showcasing all of these very distinctively Trinbagonian elements of the Trini culture and all of that. And by extension, you're getting more work and more collaborations where you're showcasing more of a Trinbagonian culture. Have you ever gone through any periods of creative burnout? Because yes, a lot of what you're doing is showcasing elements of the culture, but at the same time, how do you sort of ensure that you're creating something that is distinctive and unique to that brand while also not, I don't want to say duplicating efforts, but just feels as if you're sort of replicating the same thing, maybe just in a different design?
Yeah, I'd say I go about this in many different ways, right? One of the things that anyone who follows me on Instagram knows is that I do a lot of different things. Like I'll draw one day, I'll do digital art one day, I'll be working on branding one day. So I'm constantly trying to change both my inputs and my outputs to kind of keep everything fresh.
Mhm.
There are periods of time where I feel like I'm nearing burnout, and when that happens, I just know to take a break. I'm not a huge believer in like the typical 5 days on, 2 days off, typical work week. So a lot of times I may be like, you know what, I feeling on, like I just gonna go and I will literally work like for days on end or weeks on end without really taking a full day off, right? I might take like a few hours off or whatever, but now I've kind of found that what kind of is the best way for me to work is I work in the morning, then I take a little break after lunch, then I'll work in the afternoon, then I might go exercise, and I might work a little bit at night. So I try to break it up and I try to just do what feels best for me. And sometimes that means working a lot and then taking a full week off. Or it might mean working a couple hours, taking an hour off, working a few more hours, taking an hour off. So I kind of mix it up. Um, I also like I a few years ago I was starting to feel a lot burned out a lot. Then I started doing weekly calls with a therapist, and that has actually really helped me kind of consider
Wow.
how I work and that kind of thing. And also like it allows you to vent to someone who's not like emotionally connected to you. So you're not venting to someone who's then taking on your stress and taking on your problems. You're just venting to someone who's kind of
Neutral.
disposing of that. Where yeah, they're neutral. When you're off that call, they're not studying you. You know what I mean? So I think that's been also a super helpful thing. So it's all about doing that personal work and also trying to be very self-aware um in terms of how you work best.
If you had to take one of your art pieces that you are really proud of that truly represents Trinidad and Tobago, what would that piece of art be?
Oof, that is a really good question. Um, I don't know. It's like choosing between like who's your favorite child? I don't know. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I would say I would say this. I would say that the exhibition that's opening tomorrow, as a collection of work, I am extremely proud of, and I think that that entire collection of work is a very, very strong reflection of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a really strong reflection of who we are, and so I would leave it at that instead of just choosing one singular piece.
Give us the details about tomorrow.
Yeah, so Field Trip is my second solo exhibition. It's a follow-up exhibition from last year's exhibition, which is my first solo exhibition. It opens tomorrow between 5 and 9 p.m. at the Art Society of Trinidad and Tobago in Federation Park. People can expect to see about 45, 47 pieces of art. It's all going to be brand new work, never before seen. So even if you go on my Instagram, you ain't seen that. You gotta come to the show tomorrow, 5 to 9. The gallery is closed on Sunday, but it reopens Monday to Thursday, and I'll be there from 12 to 6 p.m. Monday to Thursday next week if you can't make the opening night tomorrow. Special shout out to Angostura, who also sponsored the opening night and have really like been a huge helping hand in this entire process as well. So they they have also been kind of a partner on this as well. So it's been a great journey. And yeah, I mean, come out tomorrow, see the artwork. If you can't make it, Monday to Thursday next week. And I'll tell anyone listening, if you want, you could find me on Instagram. All the information is on my Instagram page. My handle is Nicholas Huggins Creative.
And do you ship outside of Trinidad? So somebody is, if they see somebody post an Instagram story from the exhibit and they see it, say, "Oh my God, I need that in my house," but they're in New York. Can
Karen's
people
asking for
outside of
himself.
Trinidad?
Keron is asking for himself. That's what he's really asking.
Yeah, so that is on the cards for next year. I think what
Okay.
I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be taking orders from people abroad during the duration of the exhibition. And it's really pricey to ship from Trinidad. So I think what I'm gonna do is take with me to maybe Miami or something and ship from Miami.
Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect.
So if people are abroad, they'll have the option as well to purchase some of the work.
Nick, I know that, this is a very extremely busy time for you. I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come in and talk to us. There's, again, the evolution of Nicholas Huggins has been, well documented, and we're seeing it in real time as things go along. So wishing you nothing but success for tomorrow. I know the turnout is going to be great. I wish I could be there, so I'll be following along the stories to watch. Rocolia, I don't know if you're gonna be inside. I don't know if you're jumping on a plane. I don't know what you're doing.
Not this weekend.
But yeah, Nick, thank you for taking the time and joining us on the digital world. And again, just keep it up, man. Keep it up. We are all watching, and like I said, the work that you are doing, I really do feel like it is leading the charge on this rebrand of Trinidad and Tobago. Something as simple as the work you did on the snow cart vendor. Again, it's just you're seeing that Trinidad life. Do you know those old time paintings that would be like we like every Caribbean home had them. These
Mhm.
old paintings that took those moments from like the cooking in the mud oven. You,
Yeah.
you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like your work is like the 2.0 to that.
Mhm.
Thank you very
Like,
much.
you know what I mean? Like it's really dope to see. Again, Nick, thank you for taking the time, and we're cheering you on from the sidelines, man.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me on.
Anytime.
All right. Bye, guys. Have a good day.
You too. You
Ladies
too.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the artist Nicholas Huggins. Please go and check out Field Trip tomorrow. Go follow him online at Nicholas Huggins to learn all about the information about tomorrow and for the rest of the upcoming week. Rocolia, can we go pay some bills, please?
But just a few. Just a few. We'll be right back, guys.
Recipes? Check. Mixer?
Thanks a
Check.
lot.
Bakery quality
Bye-bye.
lotus flour? Check. Get inspired this Christmas and wow your family with the best hops bread using Lotus Baker's flour. Lotus, the confidence to create.
All right, we are back. That was a really great conversation. It's always good to sort of get into the mind and, see what creatives like Nicholas, how they think, how they interpret, how they do what they do. Especially, I think creatives, I think, tend to get a bit of the short end of the stick sometimes in terms of getting to that point of value and appreciation and the opportunities and all of that, because I think it's a bit more intangible compared to other industries. If you are in the banking and finance space, law, medicine, all these other traditional disciplines. So it's great to see someone like Nicholas, and he's absolutely right. There are a lot of other uh, creatives in his network as well who are doing so much to really represent Trinidad and Tobago. And what I love about it is that they have their own interpretation and their own ways in how they showcase Trinbagonian culture. There really is space at the table for everyone, and I think you made the very righteous point in saying that we as a country, we're going through a bit of our own rebrand and how we showcase our culture.
Yeah, and I think it was really important for a lot of the up and coming designers or designers that are working for companies to hear this conversation, because I see it every other day. A graphic designer jumps online, jumps on Twitter, and they're attacking the Fivers, they're attacking the AIs, they're attacking the businesses that are using AIs. And I keep on saying to myself, you guys need to understand that at the end of the day, it's a business, and we in marketing, when we need something and we know we just need to whip something up, we're not
Mm-hmm.
going to go and call Nicholas Huggins. We're going to
Yeah.
jump on a Canva, we're gonna jump on a Fiverr, we're gonna jump on a Midjourney to churn out something quick that we need to do and keep it moving.
It may not even be a Midjourney because Midjourney costs money. So we may stick to
Well,
Canva.
Canva costs money too, right? So I just saying, I just
You're
saying,
right,
right?
you're right.
Because
But
because graphic designers are attacking brands right now for using AI for ads, and people are commenting, why are brands using AI? Why are brands using AI? And I keep on saying to myself, like, you guys don't understand that at the end of the day, a business has a budget, and they know when they need to get something quick and churned out and not have to spend any kind of money or not spend much money. They now have resources, because before Canva, I mean, you know this, before Canva, before AI, you always had to go to a graphic designer and then things would go out of budget very quickly. But now that we have these additional tools, we know that if we need something done quick, if we need something done cheaply, we can go to a Canva, we can go to a Fiverr, we can go to AI to get it done. But they need to hear the Nicholas Huggins of the world, who have now separated themselves from being a commodity, right? And now, because they've separated themselves and they've built their brand, they've carved out their niche, they can charge what they want. So now they get to do a lot more of the work that they want to do, versus like imagine going to Nick for a quick Instagram post for your like, you know what I mean? You're
you're
not
absolutely right.
going to him for that. You're not going to him for that.
And you're right. At the end of the day, companies have, yes, they have different budgets, but that budget is on a sliding scale as well. And when we think about budget, like companies and budget, it's not always, oh, well, if you are a big business, automatically you have a huge marketing budget. It's not always the case. Depending on how things go as well, companies' budgets can get slashed at any point in time, depending on how things went the year before, the quarter before, whatever the case may be. And you're absolutely right. This may be a large company, and they may not necessarily even be in a position to hire a Nicholas Huggins. But I also remember that we had, well, not you and I, but this was a similar argument that popped up not too many years ago. We're just replacing AI with Canva. A lot of graphic designers were up in arms about Canva and not the credibility,
Yes.
the integrity of artwork and design and graphics if you're just sticking to Canva. I've seen both sides of it, and you're right. In At the end of the day, when it comes to AI, it's a similar thing to the argument for tools like Canva beyond budget and what companies can afford. But these tools are ultimately that they're tools, and how well the results are really depends on how well you use them. We've seen, of course,
Facts.
very basic Canva designs, and you could
Yes.
tell made by Canva, it's clearly designed by Canva. You could tell that if whatever was made, they just pulled from a template and they just inserted the information and hit
Yeah.
publish,
Yep.
download, and that was it. The flip side to that, though, is I have seen artwork from graphic designers. I've worked with graphic designers who have created artwork in
In
Canva.
Canva.
Never know this was
Never
a Canva
tell.
because again, they're applying their skill, they're applying their experience, and they're still making something and making it brilliant. The other thing of it as well is that Canva is not exclusively templates. You can
Yes.
build something from scratch just within Canva. And in a similar way, I honestly, in the same way how you may have, Photoshop and all these other like software tools to create artwork, it's a similar thing with Canva. It's just I think on a lighter version in terms of like the elements and all of that you're including. But the point I'm just trying to make is that these tools are only as good as how you apply them. And
Yeah.
I think that we need to sort of move away from, well, this particular tool is to this or to that, and it's taking away from the integrity of the artwork, and more about how am I using this particular tool to enhance what I'm doing, as well customizing based on the actual client that I'm working with.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, and this is why I want more graphic designers to understand that, as you said, these things are tools. Businesses sometimes just need to get some things out And
Mhm.
even it might not even look the best, but it was done just to get whatever they need to get the job done and get it out there. And that's okay. What you need to start focusing on is learning how to craft your own space. And once you can do that, you're going to be okay. But yeah, Racolia, it's Christmas time, you know. You got any recipes for me that I could try out?
Yeah. So we have a recipe coming up. We're going to take a quick break and get into that. And I'm going to be taking some notes because it's something that I love eating. You can give me plates and plates and plates of it, but for the life of me, I don't know how to make it. We're gonna take and make some notes and learn how to make this quintessential Trini dish. Be right back, guys.